You are listening to a Harbinger Studios podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Creator Conversations. This is a podcast where I interview streamers and other creators about what they do, why they do it, and much more. If any of you don't know me, I am T-Rex, or Troy, and I stream at twitch.tv/T-Rex. That's TWRECKX_. One of my fondest memories of streaming came from the game Cathedral. It was my first game key I had ever received, and while streaming it, I had the devs come into the stream and chat with me about the game and their previous experiences with video games. This week, we have the lead developer of that game here. Erik Lavesson is a Swedish game developer and founder of Decemberborn Intereactive. I feel that with video games and all art forms, we can forget that there are real humans behind the art. Having this conversation really broke that wall down for myself. Erik Lavesson is kind, intelligent, passionate, and knowledgeable about his work, and a genuinely great person. Hearing him speak about his experience making something he loves and is proud of, even though it was a ton of work and draining at times, is incredibly heartwarming and inspiring. I am humbled to have him on the podcast and grateful to have had this chat with him. I ask all of you to check out his game. Cathedral is a genuinely wonderful experience. It is a great game made with heart, and that is why I reached out to Erik. This conversation really showed me how much love people can put into what they create. Purchase this game for yourself or someone you think would enjoy it. Supporting small artists like this is important, and getting to chat and pick their brain is why I started this podcast. Erik Lavesson is one of the good guys and deserves to succeed. Cathedral is available on PC now and hopefully consoles soon. There will be links in the episode description, or look up Cathedral or Decemberborn Intereactive and find them on Twitter at Cathedral8bit. This podcast is bi-weekly, and I will try to keep up to that schedule to the best of my ability. If you have any recommendations for creators you would like to see on the podcast, tweet us at CreatorConvoPod on Twitter. If you enjoy the podcast, we ask you to tell one friend who you would think would find some enjoyment or interest in this. If you tweeted us, we'll mention you on the show. Thank you all for listening, and let's get into this interview with Erik, and please go play Cathedral. You will not regret it. Hello and welcome back to Creator Conversations. This week we have Erik Lavesson. How are you, man?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great. Before we get into the thick of it, how about you just introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Sure thing. So my name is Erik, and I'm a game developer and programmer. I'm the lead at Decemberborn Intereactive, and we just released our first game, Cathedral, a few months ago in the end of October 2019.
Yes, it's a wonderful game. How did you decide on the name Decemberborn?
Well, I'm not entirely sure where I found it to start with, but honestly, it's just my old nick that I used to use online.
Oh, yeah?
During late 90s sometime. And I think I just got it because I'm born in December. Oh,
gotcha.
Then we kind of started the game development company in December as well. So I figured, well, let's just use that. So it's
yeah,
it's a bit of my ego there.
I like that. What's your history with video games as a whole?
Well, I mean, I was a kid during the 90s, so I grew up with the NES, and my brother had an Amiga 500. I had an Atari later on as well, so that's kind of where I played most of the game that made most of the impressions on me, I think.
Yeah.
So definitely NES. I mean, that was huge for me.
That's awesome.
I basically remember every single game I got and when I got them as a kid, so...
Is the NES your favorite console?
I think so. I mean, it's tied with the Super Nintendo, of course, because that still was a huge part of my childhood.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite video game?
Probably Super Metroid.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard to say because I think I have a few different favorites depending on which era and console and so on. But
yeah,
from that time, yeah, definitely Super Metroid.
Super Metroid. Good pick. What's your history with programming?
That's a very long and weird history. I actually started programming when I was, I think, around 9 years old. I got a computer from my parents, an old Atari 600 XL, which was, I don't know, kind of crappy, but
Yeah.
and I know it had like these weird metal buttons that gave you a shock sometimes when you touched them. Then the computer would reboot. So, but I did learn to write BASIC on it. So I kind of just got a book with small programs I could try and type in and see what happened, and just kind of change things around.
Yeah.
So I started with that, and then I actually. I think I programmed pretty much all the time. I had a couple of years when I did less of it during my teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
But then I started when I started studying and got to university. I went more into math and physics and stuff like that, and had some kind of idea that, well, programming is fun, so I shouldn't work with that because then I'll just destroy my hobby or something.
Yeah.
So I actually worked as a math and physics teacher for a few years as well.
Oh yeah.
And then kind of just couldn't keep myself away from programming, and ended up just getting a job in that area instead, and been doing it ever since.
So what kind of what did you go to school for?
As in, do you mean college or?
Yeah, university or college.
Yeah. Well, my main education was in physics. So basically, I was reading a Bachelor of Science in Physics.
Gotcha.
And then I kind of realized that in order to do anything interesting in physics, a bachelor isn't really going to take you far. So, I mean, you basically had to go into research and get a PhD, or I would do something completely different. And I don't think I was ready to try and pursue that. So I ended up going for a teacher education instead. And after that, I actually got a Bachelor of Science in programming as well.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. So what were you programming when you were like coding growing up? Were you doing anything?
Yeah, I was actually doing mostly games, I think.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I mean, they sucked since I was not very good at programming in that age, and but it was a lot of fun. And I think games is actually what got me into programming to start with.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of it's a very I don't know how to say it. It's a nice medium that way. I mean, it's very.
Oh yeah.
The feedback is enormous. I mean, in contrast to doing something with a bank system or whatever, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, you immediately see what you're doing and the effects of it on screen. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So when did you like decide that you wanted to like start making games?
I think that, I mean, I always did smaller games, and it wasn't until I actually started working in Cathedral that I got the idea of doing something commercial. Up until that point, I had done a bunch of game engines and smaller games and so on, and I don't know. There was usually some kind of interesting problem I wanted to solve, and as soon as I solved that, I just kind of gave up on the project. So,
Gotcha.
And with Cathedral, I decided that let's just try and actually make a game and release it just to see the entire cycle. And that's about 5 years ago, I think, that I started working on it.
Whew. So how did Cathedral like come into fruition? Was it originally just like one of your little like side projects, and then you were like, this could be a game?
Pretty much, actually. When I started working on it, I didn't really intend to release it at all. And when I worked a bit longer, I figured that maybe I'll do a small game and release it. And I think my time frame in my head was maybe a couple of months at that point. and that didn't turn out to be the case.
Yeah.
So I think that when I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do everything by myself, that's kind of when I realized that maybe this is something that I could actually make a complete game of and actually do a commercial product of it.
Yeah.
But that's also the point when I started bringing on composer and a pixel artist and so on.
Yeah. So like at what point in the development of the game did you realize that like you needed more people?
I think I've been working on it for maybe a couple of months, basically up to the point where I thought it should be finished.
Yeah. So was it much of a game at that point, or was it kind of just bare bones?
It was fairly bare bones, but I mean, it was a game. It's just that it didn't have more than like 10 minutes of gameplay.
Gotcha.
So it wasn't a very good game. And I think that up until that point, I did all the pixel art myself, and I started doing pixel art at the same time I started working on Cathedral. So, I mean, it was very crude. And that's kind of where I felt that, well, okay, I'll just either continue doing this and then I'll bring on more people, or I'll just stop it now because I've done all I can on my own.
Yeah, totally. So how did you find and approach people to join you on the project?
Actually, I think that, let's see, when it comes to pixel artists, I actually used a couple of different artists. At first, it was one person I found on Fiverr, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I basically had a budget of $0. So,
Yeah.
but you know, you can always find some money to pay someone to do some minor work, of course. So I found someone who could design a main character for me. And then I found a musician on Fiverr as well that I
Oh, yeah?
bought a few tracks from and worked with for a while. And I'm thinking, let's see, I can't actually remember how Aaron and I met after that, like the composer I ended up working with.
Yeah.
I think we might have met in one of the game dev groups on Facebook or something, maybe. It's been too
That's
long.
awesome. Did you end up using any of the stuff you got from the Fiverr artists?
Actually, no. I think we replaced all of it.
Yeah.
Because a bit later we actually had my friend and the CEO of the company where I work right now wanted to invest some money into the game and helping me build a company around it. So at that point, all of a sudden, I could actually find a pixel artist and pay them to do all of the pixel art. And at that point, it kind of makes sense to just use the old material as reference, but I think we replaced everything.
Yeah. So when did you like decide that you weren't going to do any kind of crowdfunding or like look for any outside sources of money?
Well, let's see. I think that might have been. I don't think I ever decided on it at some specific point. I always just kind of had that idea that I didn't want to crowdfund the game. And to some extent, probably because I didn't even know if I was going to finish it.
Gotcha.
And just, I don't know, if I made a crowdfunding campaign and raised a bunch of money, then I kind of feel like then you have a responsibility to actually finish that as well. And
yeah,
I didn't really give that promise, so
yeah. So you're not against crowdfunding in any way. You just didn't want to be locked into the responsibility.
Pretty much. I mean, it's. I do think that. I mean, I've crowdfunded games myself, especially on Kickstarter, and I like the idea that you can give money to people with interesting projects. I mean, I really like that idea, but it's also, there's always a risk of doing so. And of course, there are many projects today that can't really deliver. And I feel much better, like what I did with the guy who actually ended up investing money for us. He ended up also getting a bunch of the shares in the company, which is, I don't know, fair. I think that's. I mean,
totally.
you should have some kind of equity if you invest in a game, and I mean, Kickstarter and the likes isn't really an investment, so.
Yeah, that's true. So, how did you decide to self-publish, and what does that exactly entail?
Self-publish basically means a lot of sleepless nights. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out marketing strategies and trying to basically figure out how to reach out to people. Which I think if we'd gone with a publisher, that's where they could have helped us. We could have gotten help with reaching out to people and maybe been able to do a bit more interesting things with things such as maybe localization and so on as well, if we had some support from a publisher.
Gotcha.
But we ended up just doing everything ourselves.
Yeah. Do you wish you had used a publisher, or are you happy with the way things went?
In retrospect, I kind of would have been interested in giving it a go to go through a publisher instead.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I really like the idea of going out on our own and just kind of not being tied into anything. That's kind of part of not doing the Kickstarter, part of not doing publishing and so on. But it's just extremely difficult. Reaching out was a huge problem.
Yeah. So did you learn a lot about advertising and marketing?
I did learn, I think I learned a lot about it, but I also learned that I think the main takeaway is that it's way harder than I could ever imagine.
Yeah.
Like when you think you're making waves in some way, you're really not.
Yeah.
It's extremely difficult.
Yeah. Did it save you money to not use a publisher?
I mean, most likely not. I think that the publishers I've seen so far seems to work a lot on what do you call it, on revenue share.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, sure, you'd probably give up some revenue if you went with a publisher. But on the other hand, I mean, if you can get, say, 70% or whatever, I mean, from a lot more sales, then that's still better than getting 100% from almost no sales. So
yeah. So why did you choose a retro style for Cathedral?
I'm not sure, actually. I mean, I think to some extent it was because there's it was an easy entry level for me because I could start pixeling away right away, and I mean, it's just an easy way to get started on creating stuff, even for a programmer trying to do art.
Yeah.
I mean, that was also kind of humbling because you realized after a while that pixel art might look simple sometimes, but it's really not.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, a combination of that plus I really just love that style. I mean, I still grew up with the NES, and we used the NES platform. The NES palette, which is, I don't know, I really like those colors. It's feels like childhood, I guess.
Yeah. So you ended up deciding to go with like a Metroidvania kind of game.
Yeah.
Was that like a decision you had from the very beginning, or did that come later when you were like, hey, I want to make a Metroidvania game?
I think that came later, actually. Cathedral was designed very much in an, I don't know, ad hoc way. We didn't have a lot of game design documents and so on when we started. So at first, it was kind of just a long linear game. we didn't really have stages as such back then either, but we didn't have any kind of backtracking or fast traveling or whatever. I mean, it was missing most of the stuff that you would associate with a Metroidvania. So somewhere along the line, we kind of started talking about doing different branches and so on, and I think that's where it turned into a Metroidvania.
Yeah, so did that present challenges in that when you decided it was going to be a Metroidvania, you had to go back and like redesign levels, anticipating that you were going to have to go back through those areas with new abilities?
Yes. We actually did a lot of redesign on the early areas, and I think that the very first area of the game, we wanted that to incorporate different elements like, say, puzzles where you could use later game items and so on. And since we didn't even know about those items when we did the first area at first, we really didn't have anything like that. So we actually ended up doing the first area the very last, I think. Like, that's the final piece of the game that we designed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Cathedral's engine was built from scratch. Could you explain like what this means to someone who isn't as familiar with game development?
Sure. So basically, I think most people today go for a ready-to-use engine, such as Unreal Engine 4 or Unity and so on, which gives you a lot of the subsystems, that is, drawing things on screen and sound, input controllers and so on. Like you have all that ready to go, and you can start focusing on the actual game right away. What we did was, or what I did with the engine in Cathedral, was to decide and write it from scratch, meaning I had to write all those parts too. So we didn't really have that much in terms of input handling or actually the code for drawing things on screen or so on. We had to build all that ourselves, which is, I think, in some ways stupid of us. Because I mean, it's obviously not the most economical thing to do, because we would get way further away quicker if we used an out of the box engine. But in some way, that's also the fun part of game dev for me, writing these systems from scratch.
Yeah. So why is that? Why you decided to make the engine yourself? Is that you just had fun with it?
Yeah, I mean, I could say that it's because it gives you a certain game feel, or that you have control over everything and so on. And that's to some extent true, but for the most part, to be honest, it's because it was fun. That's the main reason.
That's the best answer.
Yeah.
So with your team, was it ever hard to be like on the same page creatively? Did you ever have creative disagreements?
Yeah, I think we had quite a few creative disagreements throughout the years, but on the other hand, I think we definitely had more ideas in common than not. So most of the time, I would say actually even that it was never a problem, because when we had the creative differences, I think that we still managed to kind of just find something that we all liked. At most of the time. So most of the time when someone had an opinion about something not working out, there was usually some truth to it as well. So we actually, even if we weren't always in 100% agreement, I think we ended up hashing it out and either saying that, okay, we're all in agreement that we'll just leave it alone and it's good as it is, or we'll rewrite it. So we never really fought about anything in some way.
Yeah. So are you happy you reached out to more people to work on a game as a collective?
Oh yeah, I mean, we would not have released Cathedral otherwise. I would never have been able to finish it on my own.
Yeah. Was work ethic ever a problem? Like, did you ever have days where you didn't want to work on the game? Like, was it hard to try and put hours in every day or every week?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I'd say that's the main reason why it took 5 years to do it. because I didn't work full time over 5 years. I do work as a developer as my day job as well. So Cathedral has been kind of an evening project. So I tried to put in, and for a long time I actually put in, I think around maybe between 2 and 4 hours every evening. And then during weekends, I usually put in maybe 8 hours during Saturdays and 8 hours during Sundays. But you will be able to do that for only so long while still working a 40-hour.
Yeah. And you're programming at your job as well. So when you come home, you just program more.
Yeah.
Did that become draining?
Very draining. In fact, I didn't realize it at first because I just had a lot of fun. But at some point, especially after creating a company and having a product in mind and saying out loud that this is something we'll sell, all of a sudden it just became a second job, and it's more about focusing on getting things done and having fun, and that's it's actually very draining after a while.
Yeah. So did that time that you were putting into the game slow down?
It slowed down, and at one point it came to basically a halt. When I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue. It was actually very close that we never finished the game at that point because I was done with it. And I was the only programmer at that point. So we were a composer, a pixel artist, one marketing guy, plus me doing all the coding and the level design. So at that point, I kind of just figured that, no, I can't do this anymore. This is not healthy. I took a relatively long break, and actually one of my coworkers at the company where I work was really interested in the game and ended up actually joining us after a while. And that's kind of when it sped up again, because all of a sudden we had new ideas and we had someone with a fresh take on things.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long was that break?
See, I think there probably was about half a year where I basically didn't touch the game. I tried every now and then, but I just, I had zero ideas and zero energy to work on it. So roughly half a year, I'd say, from what I remember.
Was that hard on the other members of the team making the game with you?
I think that it probably was at first, maybe, but the problem was that I think we all were kind of tired at that point. I think we all kind of decided that we could need a break, and the break just turned out to be a bit longer than we thought. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you guys weren't all located in the same place, right?
No. Our composer lives in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. Okay. And the other programmer and me, we're both located in Sweden. And also the CEO. So we actually work at the same office, the three of us. And then right now we're working with a pixel artist in the US.
So was that hard for like scheduling and communication to be in all those different places?
To some extent. I mean, I think the composer wasn't too bad because we were in the same time zone, at least. With the pixel artist, it was a bit harder because we ended up having to kind of deal with the time zone differences. And sometimes when I woke up, I had gotten a bunch of new sprites, and then maybe I had some feedback, but then he's gone to sleep, so I had to kind of drop a bunch of feedback and just wait for the next revision and so on. So it wasn't really a huge problem, but it presented some challenges.
Yeah. What were the biggest problems that you did face?
I'm actually not sure, to be honest. You mean in terms of development or just overall?
Yeah, I mean development or overall, like maybe mental.
I think that the main issue, to be honest, was probably the scope of the project and keeping up the energy and the interest in finishing it. because we were also busy with different things in our lives. Like, I mean, we all had other work outside of Decemberborn, and we all kind of had to focus on that first, and we all had families and so on as well. So I think that was the main blocker, like actually finding the energy to finish things.
Yeah. And Cathedral is a fairly large game. And was that intended from the beginning to be that large, or did it just continue to grow?
It just kind of continued to grow.
Yeah.
So we actually ended up cutting a bunch of stuff from it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had, let's see, in the game right now, you collect 5 orbs in order to progress to the end game, basically. And in the original, we wanted it to be 7 orbs, and we had a couple of areas and dungeons that we never built, that we wanted to be, like, that was part of the original ideas that we had. But we realized at some point that this is way huger than we ever thought it would be. So let's just cut some stuff out, because it's already becoming pretty big. So I mean, I think that it's maybe somewhere in 20 to 40 hours, depending on player.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like collectibles and stuff as well.
Yeah, and those actually came later on.
Yeah.
We didn't have that many collectibles to start with, but we also kind of realized that we were building a big empty world. So, and since we went more in the Metroidvania direction, we figured that it's a good idea to kind of design puzzles around collectibles as well.
Yeah, was that fun to go back in and like find little places to hide things and stuff?
Yeah, I actually had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, for instance, the book quest, where you're supposed to collect 100 books.
Yeah.
We had this idea that let's put. I think that at first we had 10 books actually that we were supposed to hide everywhere. But then we figured that 10 books isn't all that fun, because it's going to be really hard finding them, and you kind of expect the reward to be something really awesome if you just have 10 books scattered across a huge world. So we said, let's just put 100 there and just make them less obscurely hidden, or at least most of them. There's still a few of them that are kind of obscurely hidden.
Did you guys ever have like any monetary problems in development? Like, were you ever worried that you weren't going to have enough funding?
Yes. We ended up, I think, 2 rounds of investments, and basically the investments we took in were pretty small. And those investments were basically to cover marketing and the freelancers that we worked with. So the ones of us who were co-owners of the company didn't really take out any salaries or anything like that. And we still kind of ran out at one point and had to decide whether we should invest more or not. And then basically as we released the game, I think we spent our last money on the release party pretty much.
Oh, really?
At that point, we were just kind of flat out broke. So it was definitely a concern.
And was the game successful?
Depends on how you define success, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it was successful in one way, in that people seem to like it for the most part. I mean, it's definitely not a game for everyone, but we've been getting more good feedback than bad feedback, I'd say.
That's good.
But financially, definitely less than we really wanted to. Which is from the way I see it, seeing how we actually got we've seen fairly good reviews from people. I think that the main issue is reaching out, that people simply doesn't know the game exists.
Did you have a favorite like moment or piece of the game that you worked on, or like a favorite part of the game?
Actually, it's really hard to pick because both me and the other dev, when we've been playing it lately, we've seemed to say, "Oh, this is my favorite area of the game."
Yeah.
In every single area for some reason, because I don't know. I think that we have different parts we enjoy with each area. But if I had to pick something, I think that let's see. I'm not sure how much of the game you've played. Have you played through it, or have you seen?
I haven't finished it, but I've played probably like half or more.
Have you been to the icy regions?
I do not think so.
Nah, they're fairly far into the game. But that's probably my favorite area.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got when we designed it, I got like a huge Metroidish feel about that area. Just felt really cool for some reason. I think that, and probably the Bone Church is one of my favorites as well.
Yeah. If you could go back in time and do it again, what would you change?
There's probably, I'm actually not sure. I mean, maybe the pacing is something we've been trying to, maybe not the pacing, more the progression of where to go in the early parts of the game. Like trying to steer people in the right direction. We kind of, after the first boss, we kind of kick people out to the world and just expect them to solve it. And I think that's where we could probably have maybe put some more effort in to kind of guide people a bit better, which we're trying to actually do that in various patches right now. I know, make it a bit less of a running around and not knowing where to go.
Gotcha. What about on the development side of things? Would there be anything differently you would do there?
Probably nothing huge. I mean, on the code side of things, I've learned a bunch of stuff from writing this game engine. So I would probably, I mean, I wouldn't mind writing the game engine again, but if I would actually start on it today, it would look a lot different in terms of internal structure. And one thing I did one thing that I did think of is that I would not write my own physics engine today, I think. That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And most of the obscure bugs we had where something odd happened, it was always tied to the physics engine.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, I don't know, moving a block and having it fly across the screen in some weird fashion and not knowing what happened. That was always the physics engine doing weird stuff, and we kind of just had to try and recreate it as best we could.
Yeah. A little bit off topic here. Did you attend conventions?
Yes, not a whole lot of them, but we were at one in Poland, at the Poznan Game Arena in, I think, 2016. Mm-hmm. And then last year we were at Gamescom in Köln in Germany.
Would you say that conventions are beneficial?
If you would have asked me right after the conventions, I would say that nah, probably not. Because I felt like, well, we didn't really get that much out of it, except that, well, we got to show the game, and that was fun, and we met a lot of cool people. But in terms of marketing and so on, at first I felt like, well, this didn't really help that much. But the long-term effect was actually that we had people contacting us, and we've had both publishers and press contact us after seeing the game on those conferences or the conventions. So today I would say that yes, they were probably more beneficial than not. And it was definitely a lot of fun to go to them.
Yeah. Do you have any like relations with content creators in any way? In like creators reaching out to you to like cover your game or like meeting them at conventions?
Okay. Not really so far. I mean, basically, what we've done is we used Keymailer to send out keys and so on to press, but we don't really have. I think that we've started building some relations with the streamers that covered our game, and kind of we keep some internal lists of people that we like and the people that we've been connecting with, and that we kind of to watch stream the game and so on.
Would you recommend content creators go to conventions and talk to developers?
To be honest, I don't think we had that many content creators contact us, but we definitely would have appreciated it. So
yeah,
I mean, for me, if the main thing about the conferences and conventions were having people play the game, and that was, I mean, it was awesome having people stand around playing the game, and that was like the first time we really saw people play it on their own.
Yeah.
And we would have loved content creators to approach us at, for instance, Gamecom or any other conference for that matter.
Yeah. Good. Here's a question from one of my viewers. This was funny. I was streaming the other day and they came in and they were like, "Hey, have you played this game, Cathedral?" And I was like, "That's funny. I'm going to interview the lead developer of that game." And I was like, "Do you have anything you want me to ask?" And they were like, "Will there be a Switch release?"
Ooh, that question. So we've actually gotten that question a few times. And first of all, I really, really hope so, because we want to release it for Switch.
Yeah.
That being said, it is something where basically, since we didn't write the game in any known game engine, so we're kind of have to work with re-implementing a lot of stuff when we port it to Switch, which isn't necessarily a blocker. But we've spoken about it, and I think that what we're trying to do right now is actually, so it's actually interesting that you brought up publisher, because we are trying to look into getting a publishing deal for Switch.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, we are definitely working on it, and I hope that we'll release on Switch, but I don't dare to say anything 100% until we're there. But let's just say that it's definitely something we're trying to make happen. We definitely want it on the Switch.
Yeah, that's fair. So, were you all around happy with the way the game turned out and the release?
Yeah, I mean, the game, I had a lot of fun creating the game. I mean, we had ups and downs throughout the years of development, but I learned so much, and the game itself just turned out, I don't know, I personally really loved the game.
Yeah.
But I mean, I basically made a game. We basically made a game that we wanted to play. So
yeah.
So yeah, I am actually very happy with the way the game turned out, even though, of course, it has some less polished parts and some more polished parts. But overall, yeah.
Yeah. How would you recommend someone gets into game development if they are looking to do so?
I think the easiest thing is just to start building stuff, and maybe not write your own game engine directly. Maybe use Unity or something like that. And I mean, just create something and post stuff on Twitter or through some other channel or TIG source or wherever you want to go. I mean, find somewhere where you have other game developers, which is why I mentioned TIG source. Was actually a forum where I posted a lot of stuff early on when I started with Cathedral. So I mean, there are lots of people who are willing to give you advice and help you in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think you just kind of need to get started and put things out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. What kind of goals do you have for the future?
The goals right now is, if we're talking in terms of game development, basically actually releasing the game to consoles would be the next logical step for us. And then I would actually love to make some DLC for Cathedral as well, but I don't know if we're going to be able to.
Yeah. Do you want to make more games?
I think that that's one of the things we said with Cathedral, that if we can pull this off and actually make enough money to pay ourselves salaries, then this is something we want to do. In that case, we would like to make another game as well.
Yeah.
And we're not quite there yet, but we're still kind of hoping.
Do you have any ideas for games like that you would make in the future? Like, would you stick to the retro aesthetic?
I don't think we necessarily would stick to the retro aesthetic, actually. But I think that we would stick to maybe the Metroidvania formula a bit, at least.
Yeah.
Because I know I really love the exploration parts of games. We've been toying with different kinds of game ideas, and it almost always turns out to be some kind of adventure exploration based game. So mostly in the neighborhood of Metroidvania or RPGs.
Yeah. Have you played anything recently that you've loved?
Let's see. I'm trying to remember what I've played recently. I spent too much time developing games.
Is there anything that's on your list of to play?
Currently, I just started playing Ritual of the Night.
Oh yeah,
and I haven't played very far into it, so I still don't really know what I think about it. I'm having fun with it. I played for maybe 2 hours or so I'm definitely not far into it. I started playing Dead Cells a while back too.
Oh yeah,
which I still haven't had time to play until recently.
Yeah. So has time for video games kind of like been hard while making a video game?
For me, developing a game kind of filled the same need as playing a game.
Oh yeah.
So it was kind of, I had fun and I did something creative and I solved problems and basically did the same things I do when I play games.
Yeah.
So I think that naturally played less games for that too.
And I only have a couple of questions left, and these are questions I ask to everyone whoever comes on the podcast. What keeps you motivated to continue to do what you do?
I think that's, for me, as long as I think things are fun, that's what keeps me motivated. Like if I enjoy what I'm doing, at least if I enjoy what I'm doing more than I don't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I'm fine with having less productive periods where it's not as fun, but on the whole, it needs to kind of be enjoyable.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Okay, final question. How many 5-year-olds could you fight off before being overpowered?
I mean, how big are these 5-year-olds?
I think a 5-year-old on average is like 90 pounds.
All right, so I don't know. Let's make it 8 to 10.
No, only 40 pounds. 17 kilograms, if that helps.
Yeah, it definitely does. I have no idea how much a pound is. Let's just say 10.
10. Oh, that's a large number. I like the confidence.
I'm feeling lucky.
Yeah. And where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter, of course. It's just Eric Lavesson, and on Decemberborn.com, which is our webpage.
Yeah, and go play Cathedral.
Thank you. I think you should.
Yeah, it's a great game. It's wonderful. It has a great soundtrack. The art is beautiful. It's a very good game. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.